Hey guys, today's quick tip is just a few simple ways to help you get a bolt unstuck. So the first thing you want to make sure is you're using a 6-point socket or wrench because it provides more surface area to grip the bolt. And next, if you have the time, you can use a PB blaster or liquid wrench. I've also used ATF mixed with diesel fuel or ATF mixed with acetone to soak the bolt or the nut. But in those cases, you really focus on that if you have a little bit of extra time where you can kind of set that aside to let it really penetrate. If you don't have the time, one of the other tricks you can use is shocking the hardware just by hitting it with a hammer. A lot of times that'll be enough to break the rust or the corrosion loose that's holding the bolt to the hardware. Another way is heat. Whether you're using an inductive heater or a torch like this one, heat the nut or bolt up to 250 to 350 degrees, and that's generally enough to break it loose. One quick way to know that is if you mark it with a Sharpie. Sharpie mark generally goes away 250 to 350 degrees. What you also want to keep in mind if you're using heat though, is if you're around any kind of rubber or other item that you don't want to burn, you're going to want to get a heat barrier spray. Spray that part to protect it from the heat. You can find a heat barrier spray at MSC or Grainger, Amazon, or by doing a Google search. After heating, if the nut or bolt backs out, that's great. But if it doesn't, what you can do is actually switch the direction of the ratchet and tighten that back down, switch it again and back it back out. Work that back and forth, slowly removing the bolt or the nut from the part. What you want to be careful of though while you're doing that is not to put too much force in the reverse direction, because you can potentially gall the part as it's coming out, so take your time if you try that method. Last is using a chisel. Start by hitting directly down into the nut or bolt. This is going to do two things for you. First, it's going to shock the hardware like we talked about earlier, and second, it's going to create a groove that's large enough that you're then able to angle the chisel down and hit against the sidewall in the loosening direction to back the bolt or nut all the way out. Also remember, when you're putting new hardware in that does not require Loctite, use Antiseize. It is your friend and it will prevent all of this from happening in the future. So that's some of the methods we like to use to remove hardware. If you guys have other ways, please share, because after all, the idea of this whole thing is to help all of us work smarter in the shop.